Welcome back to segment 2 of episode 19. So Louis C.K., he did something kind of cool. He said, screw it, I'm going to put together my own special. I'm going to sell directly to users online. So what do you think, Ash? Is he on to something? Or is this just something that a big name can pull off?
First of all, how big of a name is he? Just not to be a smartass. Just to...
Shit, you know, I really don't know. I only recently discovered his comedy. I've heard people saying his name for the last few years, so I'm pretty much going on the word of mouth barometer.
Here's a little confession. I've never seen any of his material.
He's hilarious.
No, I don't doubt that.
You have to watch his
Here's
stuff.
the funny part. I've had him pop up on my Facebook feed now for a couple of years. People are like, Ash, you got to check this out. You like comedians. First of all, I'm very busy. I don't think people understand. Just like, so it's like to sit there and watch comedy, it's not like...
All work and no play.
No. Lots of play, lots of balance, but I'm just saying, do I have time to start to, you know, invest time in a new comedian? No, but that's not the point.
People don't realize, maybe he's not as big as he could be because he doesn't really do movies. He only does stand-up. You know, he doesn't get into that acting cameo stuff.
Okay, no, I mean, who cares about my taste or lack thereof in comedy? And that's not, my point, though, is it's very different for a Louis C.K. I didn't even know if it was Louis C.K. or Louis C.K. That's why I'm happy you set it up. But my point is, it's one thing when a guy like him does this, who has somewhat of a following, versus when we see a Chris Rock or a Jerry Seinfeld. And I know that dates me quite a bit, but I'm just saying one of the super duper established guys do it. There is something to be said. Like, self-publishing works. I've self-published a couple books, but it's different when, like, you know, like a major person does it versus a guy who's either unknown or like a
few bands have done it. I remember Radiohead doing it. Madonna did it, didn't she? And this also reminds me of the Kindle authors. You know, you get these Kindle authors who are selling like 1 million volumes a month, and everyone is like, yeah, that's great, but they were established authors. They had an established following. They fired their publishing house, and they went solo. But there have been one or two people who've actually become super top Kindle authors without having had that first. So it might actually be possible.
It is going to happen more and more, but I think that it's the reasons and the background that is different, and also I think it's different for authors than for musicians and for others. Let's just break it down. So what are the numbers? He basically says, and props to him, that he sold 100,000 downloads at $5 a pop for 500,000 gross revenue, which is insane. And then he said he netted about 100,000 bucks.
200,000.
Okay, good. Because I was like, what's 400,000 costs in this? Forget that. But here's my point. So much of this, I think, was driven by two things. The novelty factor.
Right.
That people, like in social media and Twitter, it was every other freaking tweet was Louis C.K., great, no DRM. And I was like, a lot of people are talking about this not because of the actual media, but just of the novelty. And two, I think a lot of people were doing it not out of pity, that's not the right word, but to encourage him, to say, look, we're going to support this. That novelty wears off. You know, it's like the first time you see a musician playing in the subway, you're like, well, oh, great art. Now you walk in the subway and you see a musician, you're like, okay, that's not you. Don't say, oh my God, but I'm just saying it's not novel. You're not going to give $1 to everyone. So I think this is great, but this goes back to like the sort of, oh, it's really cool. You know, I've seen the same thing with these online YouTube celebrities. They come out, they're like down with traditional media, television is dead, we're the future, kumbaya. What happens the first time that they get big and a TV network, cable, advertiser, whatever comes to them and says,
a bit of an about face.
That's it, and they go, we want you to actually be on that supposedly dead box called television that still is the biggest freaking media platform ever. Oh my God, I love it, this is what I want, and then they drop online, or they basically forget about online. And then you go look at the big established stars like Ashton Kutcher, who says, oh yeah, I'm going to set up Catalyst Films and I'm going to do this, but then CBS pays him millions and millions and he sort of forgets about the online. So I just think we need to take these things with a grain of salt. I love, you know, let's all get on the crack pipe and talk about how great the internet is and how it's going to kill traditional media and they're clueless. But come on, I mean, you can't take this and then extrapolate it. But what you talked about, just going back, I think it's different when like a Prince or a Collective Soul gets into a contractual disagreement with the record label and says, we're already freaking loaded, you know, so we're going to sort of do this as a one-finger salute. And even them, they sort of realize this is not the same thing. You know, it's like in publishing. Anybody can write. I've written a couple books. I talked to publishers. I'm not going to sit here and go, they offered me these amazing deals. They were like, we might buy one of them. We may never publish them. And I was like, okay, well, I don't need the money. I'll just publish it myself. But realistically, I'm not going to lie. There's a certain amount of credibility that comes with having a publisher do this for you.
Absolutely, because you've been curated. Someone else, the fact that someone's willing to invest in what you have says, you know, there's a vote of confidence there. What I think what's interesting though about the Louis C.K. thing is you almost have to be a big guy to do something like this, just because it cost him like $500,000 to set this up, right? He had that money already. He was able to pull that off. You could be the internet's hottest comedian, hottest internet celebrity ever. You don't have that capital, which means unless someone comes along and offers this kind of platform for you to do it yourself, such as like an iTunes, you're kind of screwed.
Here's the sort of silver lining for me. Not the silver lining, like the conclusion after 6 years in the content business. I've always said content is king, but without distribution, it's meaningless. And you know, content is king, but how popular and powerful are monarchies? Like, does the Queen Elizabeth really have any power? You know what I mean? So you can throw out the one cliche, but then actually understand what it means. Right now, with social media, with YouTube, with Twitter, with Facebook, with Crapster, with everything that's out there, with there being literally no filter to publish, produce, be an artiste, the supply of content is so insane. The clutter of content is so insane that I think, you know, this worked because it was a middle-level celebrity, probably hilarious. I'm definitely going to go check him out. You know, who basically got a free pass in terms of cutting through the clutter because of the novelty. You know, so this was a very unique thing. I think, if anything, this is like the opposite case study. You know what I mean? If anybody
it's the exception that proves the rule kind of thing.
Well, it's not that. It's the sort of people reacted very differently. You can't just put something out and expect every single Twitter account with hundreds of thousands of followers retweeting this. Get it? Because nobody cares. It's like, what's in it for them? It's like, oh, this is too commercial. You know what I mean? But here, it was just got a lot of PR because it was novel. So I'm just saying, before we write the eulogy for publishers or media companies, like, let's just realize that the world's not really going like that. Like, again, television at its best year ever. You know, audiences are still watching a lot of TV. On
a similar note, I have a friend, he co-authored a marketing book that was a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller. His name's Julian Smith. He co-wrote it with Chris Brogan. It was called Trust Agents. It did really well. He made a lot of money off of it. He just released his second book, and what he did two interesting things. He published it direct. He bypassed his publisher and went straight to Kindle. He's giving it away. And I think in like the first week, he moved 15,000 copies.
Yeah, you know, I'll say this. When I launched my first and second books, I think I had priced the ebooks at like $5, which I in hindsight now I realize is way too much, but at the time it made sense, because if you priced it like at $2 or $1, which a lot of people do now, people are like, well, there's no value, it's almost free. But now, on my to-do list, which I have bigger fish to fry, I've always said I would like to do an experience and just put it at like $1, put it at $2, just to see. And it is true.
Find that magic price point where, you know, you
move enough volume. I mean, I'm at a point where I'm like, I would give it away. Seriously, to me, content is like marketing. Like, it doesn't matter if it's going to sell.
Well, that's just it, you know? It is marketing.
Yeah, that's what it is. Okay, so props to Louis C.K. Higher on the to-do list than bringing down my ebook price to $2 is listen to Louis C.K. But we'll see if this was the exception to the rule or if it's a sign of things to come. We're going to take a short break. Anything else before we move to lightning round?
No, that's about it.
Lightning round it is.